So what's up people and welcome to the Mission 63 discussion of Spy Family. So Mission 63 came out about 5 days ago, and as always I will leave a link to this mission that's currently being shown on the publisher's official website, Manga Plus, for free to the North American audience. So if you're interested, go take a look at it before they pull this mission back. So Mission 63 or Chapter 63 was a very interesting one. Despite the chapter not having any of the main characters, Lloyd, Yor, or Anya in it, it was still very pertinent to the story, and it was also the one that was most reflective of what goes on in real life, because the theme of this chapter revolved around propaganda and misinformation. And the character that we get to see in this chapter is one of my favorite support characters in this series, Sylvia Sherwood. And this time she is working with some of the other agents in the WISE organization. And this chapter especially revolves around a very new agent who is very idealistic, but also very naive. And the contrast that we get between Sylvia and this new agent is very interesting to see. Now, the story revolves around a Estonian opera singer named John Wellman. To help establish diplomatic ties between Estonia and Westalis, John decided to go and perform in Westalis to help improve diplomatic relations. And this is all very good, but what's interesting is right at that time, all of this interesting news comes out with regards to this character. And none of it is good. And it covers such things as his affair with other ladies, as well as some potentially criminal activities that he may be associated with. And so because of all of this harsh news that comes out, his reputation plummets in Estonia. And so during this diplomatic trip to Westalis, it becomes a question of whether him visiting is even good for the relationship anymore. And what's interesting is, of course, the new agent agrees with much of the public in that, according to the news, this opera singer John Wellman is a real scumbag, and he feels there should be no reason anybody should support this gentleman. And of course, Sylvia takes a more balanced approach of saying it's important to understand each one of these news articles before one makes a decision. And Sylvia has to remind the agent that their job is to help keep the peace between the West and the East. And if a lot of this news travels with John when he comes visits Westalis, then this is going to create a tremendous amount of political strife. And because their objective is to keep the peace between the East and the West, they needed to minimize the consequences that comes with all of this bad news. And the new agent feels that this is wrong because of John's questionable background, and he questions why he should even defend somebody so disgusting. And there was a very interesting thing that Sylvia brought up, which was that she was not interested in this new agent's opinion. She was interested in finding out what the truth was. And why it was so important with regards to this sort of situation is because people's lives often hinged upon understanding what was real and what was not. And the story eventually shows what Sylvia means when there is a death threat that surfaces against John. And this, of course, creates a problem with the WISE organization because, of course, they need to protect John in order to retain that relationship between the East and the West. And what's interesting with this story is in the next few days afterwards, additional news comes up that all of the previous news, or at least a good majority of it, seems to be false. And evidence has come out in the contrary that argues against any of the previous news being valid. Now, what's interesting with regards to that is once that news came out, all of a sudden that new agent became completely supportive of John Wellman and said he experienced so much trauma from the fake news that they needed to support him as much as possible. And when Sylvia said, "So you are interested in defending him?" And he said, "Of course, he is a very good person." And this 180-degree turn is very interesting because it is also kind of reflective of what the public is showing in this manga. And what's interesting is then when Sylvia said, then we better make sure that this death threat doesn't create a problem with John and we need to protect him very well, the new agent couldn't even understand what Sylvia was talking about, considering his idea was, well, if this is all fake news, the death threat is probably fake as well. Who would want to hurt somebody as good as John Wellman? And it was at that time that Sylvia brought up another interesting point, which is that for people who want to believe a certain ideology, it doesn't matter how much evidence comes out to the contrary, they're going to believe what they believe. So if there is a death threat, and if somebody wants to kill John Wellman, the recent news that negated all the previous scandals will not change that person's viewpoint, which was completely foreign to this new agent's understanding. He just could not understand how that would be, considering all the news was saying such good things now about John. And this really shows, in many ways, the frightening nature of propaganda. Every one of us have seen probably in real life situations where things can go 180 degrees by the public from one side to the other relatively quickly, and then go back again based upon the changes in the so-called news that suddenly comes out. But the other side we have also experienced as well. No matter how much evidence comes out to support or go against a specific situation, certain people will remain in a certain idea no matter how much evidence goes against the contrary. And both situations turn out to be equally frightening as well as very, very dangerous. And so, upon continued surveillance of the situation, they notice one guard near John Wellman's public appearance that seems to be very questionable. And so by contacting one of the agents who was in the field, who is pretending to be a kebab salesman, Sylvia asks that field agent to keep an eye on them. And sure enough, eventually that gentleman pulls out a gun and starts going towards where John Wellman will be. And so immediately Sylvia and the team go to that situation. And that field agent can't really do anything because he is undercover, except maybe to go and get in the way of that assailant by offering free kebabs to John Wellman. And that gave enough time for Sylvia to come in and take that assailant down. And my gosh, it was a joy to see Sylvia in action. And so this chapter was very interesting, not just in terms of the action and the enjoyment of seeing how well Sylvia works in the field, but to understand what it means to view the certain news that is out there and to try to assess what is really true. And what was interesting in the very end was that now the new agent finds out that part of that scandal seems actually to be true, and that John Wellman actually came to West Alice not as a diplomatic relations, but to defect because it would be dangerous to remain in Astania due to his affairs with some very shady individuals. And at that point, the new agent doesn't even know what side to stand on. And Sylvia answers, well, if you really want to find out, before you make any decision, you better do your best in understanding and deciphering the information. And so, as much as we always have to make a stand, we also have to understand that there may be a situation where we may be wrong and be open-minded enough to understand that and do enough due diligence to find out what is the most clear information at that time. And by seeing it through somebody as experienced as Sylvia Sherwood, and through the organizations such as the Wives Organization, where information is priority, it really does show, even in our daily lives, how important it is to not just go make an irrational judgment. And so chapter 63, at least for me, was a very interesting one. It really brought out many of the facets with regards to trying to understand what propaganda and information means. And so anyway, that was chapter 63. Because it had such a very interesting topic, if any of you can leave your comments, I would appreciate it. And once chapter 64 comes out, I'll bring up another video and hope you join me at that time. So thank you very much for watching. And until the next episode, happy manga reading. And as always, Jaya, nice day everyone.